Alright guys, how are we all doing? Today we are going to look at some Angular testing. On your way as you're coming in, please like and subscribe. So, I am going to give you guys a very good and compelling reason for you to learn Angular, for you to watch this video, and for you to learn how to unit test. So, the first thing I want to talk about is why Angular? What's the point of Angular? Why don't you just use React? I already have a video explaining how to unit test in React, but very importantly for you, I want to show you something. Okay? So, Angular, React, Vue.js, they're all competing for dominance. Okay? As you see, React currently has the most jobs available, with Angular slightly just, catching up. If we go to certain countries, however, you can see that Angular actually has the edge in certain countries. Okay, so why is all of this relevant? Shouldn't we just focus on React now? This is the issue that is caused when everyone in the job market is just focusing on React. Alright, I would say React is more popular, people like it, people think it's more fun. The issue that's caused and how it affects you and the job market is that there are a lot more developers practicing React, using React for personal projects, which leaves a big opportunity for you to go inside of Angular and get your first programming job. I've never had a job in React. It's a very competitive market. I've applied to many React jobs over time. I once got to the final stages of a junior React interview when I was 2 years into the industry. I got rejected, not because I didn't pass the test. I passed all the tests that they gave me. The reason why they rejected me is because they said they found a better and more experienced candidate. This was for a junior developer job, right? Do not become a framework warrior, right? We are here to make our money. We are here to code. We love coding. We're here to make our money, right? JavaScript has multiple different frameworks. Use all of them. Use Vue, use React, use Angular. Do not be a soldier in the framework war. You're not here to advocate for any specific framework. They're all about the same thing. They have their benefits, strengths, and weaknesses. Do not become a framework warrior. Cool. So, with that out of the way, and why, oh right, sorry, I didn't explain why you should learn how to unit test. I have a video on React on how to unit test. Essentially, what you want to understand with unit testing is crucial for you to get that job, right? So when we unit test, right, it gives our employer a signal that we're ready to get the job, that we're a professional developer. If you have a take-home test, right, and the employer doesn't ask you to unit test as often as they don't, you need to unit test in that take-home test because it makes you look more professional and like you're ready. I have failed coding tests where they didn't tell me that I had to unit test. I failed them, and the reason they gave me for failure is because I didn't have unit tests. Alright? They're not going to tell you this, but you need to do it or they might fail you. Alternatively, I've done unit tests for a company that didn't even do any unit tests and I got the job. Why? Because I looked more professional. I was giving the employer signals that I was ready to come in and kick some ass and be a great developer. Okay? So please, please, please unit test. Okay? So now let's get into what the application is. I've just created a very simple application that we can unit test together. Essentially, I'm gonna walk you through how to unit test this simple application, and then as applications get more complex, hopefully this video would have served as a great foundation for you to start unit testing. So what does this application do? It's just a simple counter application. You have a decrement and an increment. However, when you get to 0, you can no longer decrement. So that is my application. I'm gonna quickly start coding and talk to you about the philosophy of unit testing and what we want to do when we unit test. Just very quick, if you're not familiar with the Angular framework, do not worry, it's very simple. This is our HTML, okay? It just looks like normal HTML, but it's more. What's this click? Well, in Angular, they swap out onClick for just a simple click. Oh, what's this? Is equal to decrement. Essentially, I'm going to show you this later, but this is a JavaScript method, a JavaScript function that we're binding to our HTML. Count is a JavaScript variable that we're binding to our HTML. And same with increment is a method that we're binding to our HTML. If we just quickly go back to the website, so every time I click this, inside my JavaScript, a function is firing off, method is firing off to increment. When I click this, every time I click it, a function method is firing off to decrement. Okay, simple enough. Let's go inside our JavaScript now. So this is called the app component. It's essentially a class. I don't want to boggle you down with all this terminology, right? If you guys want an Angular specific video, me explaining Angular and how to get into Angular, please leave a comment below and I will walk you through Angular. It's a very simple framework. It's actually more simple than React. So, like I said, count is a variable. Count starts as 0, okay? And then we have our functions / methods, all right? And then every single time someone presses that button, we increment. Every single time someone presses the other button, we decrement. Just a quick lesson on what a class and object. What a class is a blueprint for an object. Essentially, every single time I use the app component, I've created a new object. We do this to save time, so that way we don't have to create, duplicate our code and have multiple different objects that are just the same code. So essentially, I can create multiple of these counters and put them on my page. This is why we have objects. So let's get straight into the testing. All right. All of this code comes with Angular, right? I didn't write any of this. This all comes with Angular, right? I'm going to remove these two tests for now. So very interestingly enough, Angular pre-writes a lot of this code. Essentially, we are getting the app. We are getting the actual app, and we are getting the fixture. This is brilliant. It's very simple enough. It is awesome. Angular writes it all for us. So what I am going to test, right, is if the app actually appears on the page, or better yet, if the component exists in the DOM. So very simple enough. The testing framework I'm using, by the way, is Jest. I highly recommend learning Jest with Angular. I know that Angular comes with Karma straight off the box, but uninstall that and install Jest immediately. The reason why I say that is because every single company I've applied for a job for, every company that I've worked with that does Angular, they use Jest. The reason why they use Jest is because Karma's testing browser takes forever when you run tests, and when you have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of tests, it is absolutely pointless to wait that long. So the browser takes too long for the test to run, and I'll show you right now. If I just do npm run tests, it's going to run all my tests. Okay, and then we're just going to see, and yay, so test suites is the amount of test suites, and tests is the actual tests in the test suite. So the first test that we ran is passing. So next, we're going to want to plan out the tests a bit more. Okay, so let's get into the philosophy of unit testing a little bit more. So when we unit test, what we want to do is we want to pick out things that we would do to test our application manually, because that's a key thing about testing. There used to be a point where there were no automated tests. Unit tests are automated tests. We want to test the application manually, right? So what would be some manual steps that we do? And this is a very good way to pick out unit tests. So a manual test would be, we want to click the increment button and see that it increments. We want to press the decrement button and see that it decrements. We want to check if when the component renders and it exists, it starts at 0, right? These are valid tests. And another test that you may have missed out, well, when the component gets to 0, does it decrement further? Because in our code, in our HTML, we actually have an if statement that doesn't allow, or sorry, better to say it like this. We have a if statement that only allows decrements if the value is above 0. Now, if the value is not above 0, so it's at 0 or below 0, it can never get below 0, but if it's at 0, we can never decrement, which stops the counter from going below 0. So these are 4 tests that we can start to create, right? So we've planned it out, and I would recommend sometimes doing it on a piece of sheet of paper. Sometimes in the comment, you can add comments, but I've already done it for you, so I'm just going to go straight into the coding. So Angular is a very amazing tool when it comes to coding. So the first thing is we can just copy and paste the structure actually. So the first thing that I want to test is yeah, it should create the app, and count should start at 0. Okay, so very important when it comes to writing a description, please make it as descriptive as possible. You do not want to be writing short descriptions or very unclear descriptions. I've worked at a company where someone did that, and I didn't understand what the test was actually testing. Okay, and then it took me a very long time to fix it. This person had already gotten a different job, right? You need to leave your test behind so the person after you can fix it. Now you're thinking, okay, but I'm new, I'm applying to a job, I'm doing a take-home test. What does it really matter at the take-home test if I put a large description or not? It's about signaling, right? You want to signal to your future employer that you're ready for the job, and writing a good test description makes it look like you're ready. So this is not a great test description. If it's really a struggle, because I have language barrier issues, right? I'm not the best writer in the world. I would suggest you use ChatGPT to write your test descriptions if you have an issue. Going into the thing about ChatGPT, actually, could I just copy and paste all my code, right, and then ask ChatGPT to write my tests? Of course you can, right? But I kind of don't recommend it. The reason why I don't recommend it personally is because, well, you're gonna have to explain your code at one point, right? And it's better if you have an understanding and if you wrote the code. And very, very importantly, ChatGPT writes very bad code, makes very bad coding decisions, to the point if someone looks over your code, they'll be like, why did you do that, mate? Like, this is so weird, right? So I wouldn't recommend that you use ChatGPT to write your tests for, to write your tests for the coding assignment. I would, maybe use it for help here and there, ask it questions. And yeah, at work, if you get a professional job, do not use ChatGPT. That is illegal. You could get in trouble for that and fired if they ever find out. But anyways, enough about ChatGPT. Let's work out. So the first thing I would want to do is I want to check if count is at 0. And this is the absolute beauty and why I love Angular, right? We have the app, right? I told you count is a variable inside the component, inside the object that we created. We can just ask app, hey, is count equal to 0? And then it will essentially turn around and say, well, it is or it isn't, it is or it isn't. Let's run the test and see what happens when we do that. I am expecting it to pass, and look at that, it passes. I just realized you guys can't see whether it's passed or not. My bad. Let me quickly fix that. Okay. So as you can see, it has passed, right? That is wonderful. We know that count is equal. We know that count is equal to 0. Okay. So now we can go on to the next test. And again, these are not the best test descriptions, but I'm just gonna speed through these. This is gonna be the increment one. increment, and what I'm doing to run these tests is doing npm run tests. And then the next one we are going to do will be decrement, right? Okay, so now essentially the really cool thing, so I'm expecting count to be 1 here, and then let's say if I have 2, I would want count to be 1 if my count was starting at 2. So the next beautiful thing, so we know count is at 0, okay? So the next beautiful thing about Angular, we have a method, a function, right? We can just ask app to increment, right? We can just ask it to execute this function. It makes testing so easy, right? So now, essentially, we will check if it is equal to 2, sorry, this is equal to 1, because we start at 0, and when we look at the code, it increments by 1. Plus plus is increment by 1, minus minus is increment by 1. So now with app, we have a bit of an issue, right? If it starts at 0 and we're not allowed to decrement any further after we're at 0, then the number is always going to be 0. Right? So this is another beautiful thing. We can, in the test, we can set count to 2, quite literally, right? We can say, hey, no, let's start count at 2, right? And now when we decrement, it will be 1 because obviously, yeah, obviously 1 minus 2 is equal 1. And then finally we can, so it starts at 0. I don't, actually for more clarity, let's just put this at 0. It starts at 0. I don't need to put this here. We would expect it to be 0 again. We will call this decrement, we will call this does, we will just call this does not decrement after 0. Be as descriptive as possible. I'm not being descriptive, I'm just trying to get through this, right? So we've got that all set up. I'm just going to quickly see if you guys, yeah, you guys can see it. I am going to run npm run test again to see if my tests pass. They should. Okay, let's see. Ooh, one of them has failed. Ooh. We have 5 tests. App is equal to 2. Okay, so yeah, everyone makes mistakes. This is very important. I'm glad that happened. I just made a really stupid, boneheaded mistake, and even people who have been working well a bit as programmers, like if you are someone who is stuck because you're like, oh my god, I made a mistake, I'm never gonna do this. Programmers make mistakes all the time. I just made a very silly mistake. I forgot to ask app to execute decrement, right? This stuff happens all the time. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to spend a bit of time with your console, with a bit of time with your computer, just constantly failing. The more and more and more you fail, the better and better you get at it. I made a mistake, and essentially there we go. So, do you think that this is enough? Is there more we can do? So this is a good solution, but to be completely honest with you and to be quite frank with you, some employers may not accept the solution, right? And I'll give you some time to think about what is the issue with the solution, right? We've just proven that upon executing different methods, the variable count will change. This is classic unit testing, and some employers might not be okay with it. They might want you to go a bit further. Just take your time to think about it. Pause the video if you need. Okay, now I'm back and I will explain what the issue is. Right, the issue is I've executed all of these functions and methods inside my object, right? I've done that. However, I have not actually interacted with the user interface. Yes, unfortunately, I didn't do that. So because I haven't interacted with the user interface, you could make the argument that, hey, I don't actually, I haven't proven, I haven't actually unit tested, well, I have unit tested it, but I haven't actually proven that the code works, right? And what if there's what if I may, and this is very, very important actually, right? So, very simply, what happens if I do this? Do you think all the tests are going to pass or fail, right? If I do that, do you think the tests are all going to pass or fail, right? I've removed the decrement. So, sorry, I've removed the increment. So we can no longer increment, right? I've removed it, right? So I will now run this test and let's see what happens, right? I've removed it, right? Will it pass or it's all passed? Why has it all passed? Okay, so the reason why it's all passed is because when I made my tests, I never actually interacted with the UI, right? And this is very crucial that we interact. Some employers would want you to interact with the UI. Why is this important? Well, look at my example before about, or what I talked about, why we unit test. We unit test to give businesses assurance that our code works, and when it doesn't work, we know why it doesn't work, right? If I put this in a code base and someone accidentally or for whatever reason needs to delete the increment button, they will push up the code and all the tests will pass and they will never ever know that they did something wrong. And then when a customer, because we don't have time to test every little feature on the website, when a customer comes along and they need to do what they need to do, they need to push that button and they can't, well, we have an issue, we have a bug, we might lose a customer. Where I've worked, I haven't worked like Facebook or Google, and that's a very important distinction to make. You are probably going to work for what we call a SaaS company, okay? They're not going to have millions of users and millions of customers. They're going to have a few customers and users, right? A small mistake like that could cost your company a customer, right? And that's why businesses see unit testing as very, very important to them, okay? So now that I've shown you the general understanding or the general basics of how to do unit tests, it's not over yet. I'm going to explain to you how to unit test the actual UI, because that way, if we run into that issue, right, like, it's not going to be that bad, right? Like, sorry, if you run into that issue, then you know what the issue is, and yeah, you can just solve it, right? So what I'm going to do, so this is not code that Angular gives you. I'm going to write another before each, right? This time, it does not have to be async like the one above. We do not have to wait for anything. Essentially, we're just going to go right into it. So I am going to create a variable called fixture. And to create this variable, I need to also, well, actually, I am going to create two variables. We're going to let component equal, and this is going to be the app component, right? And it's okay. We have that there. And then we are going to create another variable called fixture. So let's let fixture. If you guys want me to touch on more like things about like why we call things variables, so on and so forth. So fixture is going to be a type of the app component, or if you want me to go through the inner workings of Angular, I can do that. So we are going to set the fixture to be equal to testbed dot create component. So as you can tell, we are just going to create, so we're actually just going to create the component, so that way we will have a copy of the component running and being live. That is perfectly fine. And then we're going to have component is equal to the fixture dot the component's instance. So now we have an instance of the component. That's all fine. What is the issue here? I am entirely, sorry, I'm not entirely sure what's the issue here. Oh, wait, okay. The property prototype is missing app component, but, okay, but, that's a bit weird. But this is an app component, that's fine. Let's do fixture.detect changes, and this, what it does, it detects when changes have happened. Let's just quickly go into that. Oh, okay. I think I know what the issue is. I think have I misspelt this? Is missing an app component but required type of app component. That's a bit weird. Fixture.component instance. The app, but this is the app component. How weird. Oh, okay. No. Oh god, again, I made another mistake, and this is very important. So I hope you see what my mistake was. Instead of saying it's a type of app component, I said it's equal to app component. So that's why it was giving me that error. So now I said, hey, this is a type of app component. Everything's working. Everything is going beautifully. So essentially, the fixture is basically the DOM. We have it. We created it here, but we do not. Now that we've done that, actually, we can actually remove all of them from there, because we did do that before, but yeah. But now, so essentially, the difference is now is that every single time a change happens, we will be detecting it, right? So I'm just gonna quickly remove it. So every single time, so we've essentially done a little bit of code refactor, made it a bit cleaner, but the key thing is, and the reason why we did the code refactor is the .detect changes. So every single time we do something like click a button, this will detect changes. Essentially, this is the component. This is when we ask the component to do stuff, right? We're going to ask the component to do. We're not going to directly talk to the object, the method anymore. We are going to use the fixture, right? And yeah, every single time we're going to use the fixture. And then what we're going to do is actually click on things using the fixture, right? So the fixture is like the DOM, the raw HTML. The component is actually just, the object that we can communicate with. But we're not going to communicate with the object anymore. The reason why we're not going to communicate with the object anymore is because we are not checking. So for example, we're not going to use increment anymore, right? Because when we communicate with the object, we're actually not when we do increments and decrements. Sorry, when we ask it directly for methods, we're not necessarily testing if it works anymore. Okay, so it's very important. We're not gonna be doing what we were doing before. So this is fine. This is fine. We've done the refactor a little bit. So the first one should pass, right? And then with what we're gonna do now, right? Instead of directly communicating, asking the object, what we're gonna do is create a const, and then we are gonna call this const the count element, and then we're gonna set that equal to something, right? So a very important thing that I want to do actually is create a data test ID. So I talked about this in my React video. Doing a data test ID makes it more professional. So when we actually write our code, we tend to use data test IDs. This is the standard. The reason is because we don't want to grab a specific class or an ID. And the reason why we don't want to grab a class or ID is because, well, there are multiple classes, and people might add a different class or add the same ID or the same class somewhere else. And then when we go to get it in a huge code base, when we try to get the class, well, this could cause a bug, and then we're trying to fix it, and we're trying to say, oh, don't get this class exactly, get that class. So we want to use data test ID and make it unique, so we know that that is the only component, the only element using it. So we have the count element, right? Now, what I want to do is grab it. So we're going to do fixture dot name, and I love the code completion with my WebStorm. And then we're going to query selector. So I can just pop in, and which is really cool, I can just pop in the data task ID. I have to put it around brackets, all fine, but I can just quickly pop this in. It's been popped in, right? And essentially we are then gonna check. So we're checking if count, so we're gonna talk to the component here directly, right? We're just gonna check if count is 0, but we can also expect, so we're looking at the element, right? We can expect that the count element dot, that the count element, right? We can try to trim it a bit, right? So we're gonna look at the text content. So we're gonna go inside the element, look inside the text content, then we're gonna use trim, just so so what trim is gonna do is gonna make sure, oh, actually maybe it's better if I show you, well, so what trim is gonna do is gonna make it very nice. So instead of it having a lot of spaces, it's just gonna have a straight 0, right? So I'm gonna run this first test. I'm gonna comment out all the other tests. Yeah, we're gonna comment out all the other tests. And yeah, let's comment them out. Let's run the tests again. And then we are going to see if it passes. And yep, there we go. Tests are passing. So this is based on the 2 tests we created here. So what we've done is we've grabbed the actual element and saw that it was 0. So for example, if for whatever reason I want to put this at 1, right? And I run the tests again. I'm just going to let you guys see it. I'm going to run those tests again. I've put it at 1. It will fail, right? Let's see why it failed. It passed, right? The component variable was at 0, right? It passed the component one. But when we look at the actual HTML code, bang, it was not at 0, so it didn't pass that one, right? So let's change the code. Ooh, no. Let's change. I was trying to undo that. Let's change the code back to bind it to the variable. We've binded it to the variable. We're all good now. So this is the key, or the difference, right, between you not getting the job and you getting the job. You understanding this key when it comes to testing, right? Because now the employer, right, and this is very important, the employer does not have time to sit down and go, oh, maybe Itamar just didn't understand what I wanted for him. He wants someone who gets results, unfortunately, and it's not fair. I completely agree. But this is the world that we live in, right? So you need to be able to show the employer, give him or her the right signals that you're ready for the job. All right, let's go straight into it. We are just gonna finish this up. Thank you. We are gonna finish this up very soon. I know this has been a very long video, but I'm trying to give you the best value for your time, trying to get you to really understand. Okay, we're just gonna finish it all with the other tests. So instead of specifically, so we're not allowed to access. We're not allowed to access the component anymore. Instead, what we're going to do is go create a const, and this const this time we're doing increment, so it is going to be const increment button, and then this is gonna be equal to the same as here, but we're gonna change it. So instead we are gonna get fixture increment, and this is the beauty of testing, right? Nothing too complicated here. All we're gonna do is increment dot click. Okay, lovely. Now we're gonna test if the component value has changed, but very importantly, and actually maybe I should actually put this outside. Yeah, I might put this outside. So as you're coding, you might change. Oh no, fixture doesn't exist outside. Yeah, it's fine. I'm not gonna try to figure out how we can put that outside. So I'm gonna put this. So we're gonna have to do a bit of a declaration here. We're gonna declare it the element here, and then essentially I'm gonna just run the same expect. We're gonna expect this to be at 1. That should all be fine. With the decrement, very similar code. We will still have the component start at 2, right? We need to have the component start at 2. Instead of the increment button, we will press the decrement button. We will press the decrement button. We will click the decrement button. After we click the decrement button and our app started at 2, we expect it to be 1, and we expect it to equal 1, and that's because we started at 2, just to be, yeah, so that should be fine. Let's actually put this down here, just to be like double safe, right? Double safe that, let's just put an expect here, and we expect that to be 2. So this is going to be the element, right? This is actually going to be the element. And then finally, we want it to not decrement past 0. Very similar. So by the way, this is a very key theme about testing. As you saw, like getting our head around it, writing all of it, that was very difficult. This is very, very simple now, right? We're essentially just copying and pasting, right? If you were scared of testing in the beginning, I hope this makes it easier, right? Because at some point it just becomes very copy and pasting. So it's absolutely fine. We expect count to equal 0. Essentially, we want to grab this code, the trim code, and then we want to put this here. We want this to be equal to 0, and then just midway through it, I want to click the decrement button as well. So decrement.click. So after the count is at 0, we have to decrement.click. And I made 2 very silly mistakes this video, right? It's just to show you, no matter how professional you are, no matter any of these things, like being, it's okay to make mistakes. I see a lot of you junior developers, when I talk to you, you're like, oh no, I don't think I can make it. I spent 5 hours on a bug yesterday. Look, I spent a month on a bug when I've been working. Like programming can be quite hard sometimes, but it can also be quite rewarding. So hopefully everything works. We get this cracking. And then apparently I've made a few mistakes. Okay. So we expected, so this is the decrement one. We've expected it to be at 2. So component dot trim is equal to 0 instead of 2. That's very interesting. Okay, I know what the issue is. So mistake number 3, and that's all fine. Okay. Mistake number 3, and that's absolutely fine. So maybe this one shouldn't have passed as well, but we want to, after we do a click, we want the fixtures to detect the changes. After we set this, we want fixture to detect changes. So essentially, what is fixture detect change? It's when you run your code, it all happens bang bang automatically, right? Like it will happen so quick that any change you make while running your code is going to not happen, right? Because it takes a bit of time for everything to update, right? So when you press on a click or when you do anything, you want the fixtures to detect the change, and then when that happens, so whenever we click something or whenever we set something to something, we want changes to be detected, right? So that's very important. So anyways, we're just gonna quickly run it again. Should be fine this time. So third mistake during this tutorial. So it's okay to make mistakes. And they're all passing. We got there in the end. Thank you very much. That's the end of the video. And if you stayed to the end, you're a fucking sorry, I shouldn't have sworn. You're an absolute soldier, right? I hope you get that job. If you could leave a comment, a like, subscribe. If you could tell me what direction you want to go in next. If you want to learn the basics of Angular, like I said in the beginning, the job market for Angular is much better than React. Thank you so much for the video. If you have any feedback, of course. I just want everyone to have a lovely day, and I hope you get that job. Awesome. All right. I'll see you. Goodbye.